Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to another Anatomy of Movie. We're talking Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tale, so stay tuned as we talk about Johnny Depp and the latest in his franchise. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk, we talk movies. And now, here's Popcorn Talk's Anatomy of a Movie.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We're here, we're swashbuckling. I guess you could consider us pirates because we steal your time.
Arg.
But hopefully you enjoy it nonetheless. We give you as much treasure as you guys bring us. We have Demetri Panos.
Hey, movie fans. Yo ho ho.
I'm Phil Svitek. Out of commission today is out of this franchise is Marissa Serafini. Although, ironically, she loves this franchise, so it's a shame that she is not here to discuss it with us. First, as always, we assume that you've seen the movie, so if you haven't, go check it out unless you don't mind being spoiled. Secondly, in our description, there's a link to our rundown so you can follow along. There's a lot of neat stuff through our research that we found. So that way, if we don't always get to everything, that way you know certain facts that we were able to discern.
See, the depth of our research.
That's right. It's actually this one's quite long, actually.
Yeah.
Just because obviously it has such a vast history. But as we always do, let's start with overall impressions. Let's kick it to you.
Okay. Well, just before we started, I was telling you I actually revisited all the Pirates movies. Which is no small task, all things considered. There was 4 preceding this, and the first 3 they become longer and longer. In fact, at World's End, perhaps the most bloated, is almost 3 hours a runtime. So, but I felt it worth it. I like this franchise as a whole. In this one, Dead Men Tell No Tales, I didn't find this as overly bloated as World's End. In fact, did you know that this is the shortest runtime of the entire series? So it took
did
them
enjoy
5
that.
movies. Yeah, me too. And I also felt that there were some interesting story threads here. I enjoyed the fact that we have an older Elizabeth and Will Turner's son, who's out to break the curse. He's looking for Poseidon's trident to break the curse for his dad, who's captain of the Flying Dutchman. And so his dad can come home. And I sort of like that there's heart in there. There's a family story with that. So I enjoyed that. I also enjoyed getting a little bit of backstory, again, from Barbossa and Johnny Depp, learning a little bit more about them. Also, we have a new villain, Javier Bardem, who seemed to relish being on set and having a good time. And I thought he was a pretty good villain who was seeking to wreak vengeance upon our Captain Jack Sparrow for literally ruining his life. They introduced us to a new heroine, who I really like this actress and I like this character, Karina Smith. And I think that she, in a sense, capably filled the shoes of Keira Knightley, who was in the first 3. And she uses science, she uses the stars and wit to help. She, too, is looking for a missing father. And so there's lots happening. And that's one thing about this franchise is that there's always many things going on, pieces of the puzzle that they try to put together. Unfortunately for me, that's where we sort of become, because I just recently have seen all these movies, for me anyways, this is where the movie sort of kind of, from a story perspective, it becomes sort of a mess. And it suffers from what I call it Rogue One syndrome, meaning that the writer, in this case, Jeff Nathanson, he had some good stories to work from previous writers. It appeared that he inherited some stories to work on, but the cardinal sin he commits is by not maybe doing his research and watching the previous Pirates movies. I'm going to reference At World's End, this whole thing about backstory with Jack Sparrow and his compass, right? I think it's a great idea to focus on, yet this whole thing about Jack giving up his compass, and this causes this ripple effect that brings back Salazar. look, if you've watched it World's End, you lose count as to how many hands that compass goes through, aside from Jack Sparrow. I mean, there's so, again, it's a bloated movie. It's very convoluted, but again, that compass, it even ends up in the villain's hands of the East India Trading Company. So that was sort of kind of like bothering me. I go, we should have seen Salazar, according to this movie, a heck of a lot earlier. The other thing that they seem to have forgotten, or at least maybe Nathanson thought that the audience was going to forget, is the reason why Will Turner is now captain of the Flying Dutchman. And it wasn't by necessarily choice. And again, if you remember, everything was leading up to Jack Sparrow actually sort of kind of was thinking, I could be an eternal pirate. But at that point, Will Turner had been stabbed in the heart by Davy Jones, and he was dying. And it was Jack Sparrow who lifted up Will Turner's hand to shoot the heart of Davy Jones. And then the curse went on to Will Turner to keep him alive. So if, in a sense, if you break this curse, it's still not going to erase, at least to my knowledge, because they don't ever bring it up in this movie, the fact that he has a hole in his heart the size of a saber. You know, he could potentially die. So they don't try to fix that. But hey, you know what? Continuity, schmontinuity. I mean, at the end, it's all about, you know, trying to make some money. And in the end, it was the end of the movie that saved it for me. I felt that, you know, it made me realize how important Keira Knightley and Orlando Bloom as Will and Elizabeth are to this franchise. You know, the first three movies really aren't about Captain Jack Sparrow. It really is about their relationship coming together, falling in love, and trying between all this mayhem that's going on around them to try to develop this relationship. And you learn that Elizabeth and Will are literally and figuratively the heart of the first three movies. They really are. You cheer from them. You like them. They're good actors. They own their roles. I love them. So for me, you know, their chemistry really works. And to see them show up at the end made the movie for me. Dead Man Tells No Tales hangs its pirate's hat on the hope that we'll see Elizabeth and Will together again, and that's where it delivers. The disenfranchised for me became franchisable again, and that's where I really felt that the movie worked a lot. That's what brought it home for me. Mm-hmm. So,
well, I had overall, I enjoyed this experience. I will say this was my first Pirates movie. So for me, all those plot holes were non-existent. It's as if I recommend to the audience, find your own Trident-like MacGuffin that gets rid of your entire knowledge of the movies, and you will enjoy it just the same. I do credit it. You know, all those things that you mentioned, I recognize there's tie-ins left and right, and you know, which is fine. And as I watched it, I knew there were some references that I didn't get, but I also didn't need it.
Right.
And so conversely, when there were plot holes, I wasn't aware of them.
Right. Okay.
And so overall, it made it fun. You know, even though I've not seen the pirate movies, I know Captain Jack Sparrow is. I know a little bit of the lore. I know Keira Knightley. I know Orlando Bloom. I know their involvement in it. And so I kind of, and plus just the movie itself sets up the stakes nicely. Sure. So, you know, I think as a standalone movie, it works well, as you're mentioning, in this 5 franchise version, maybe not as much. But I had, to be honest, I actually kind of thought about it. I was like, oh, what have I been missing?
Yeah, you know, I'm like, Jesus, where were you in Davy's locker, David Jones's locker, that you missed the first floor?
Just never got around to it.
Three?
Just never got around to it.
How did you at least escape Curse of the Black Pearl?
I'm very much of the mentality, like, for example, TV, it happens a lot with me, where someone's like, oh, you're not watching Game of Thrones, you're not watching this. And I say, well, it's not that I don't like the series. It's just we're already on season, you know, at the time it used to be season 2, season 3. I'm like, I know I can go back, But you know what? I'm a kind of keep it moving forward kind of guy. So I'll catch the next show.
Right.
Meaning whatever the next thing is.
Sure.
And so with this, it just I just never got around to it. If it perhaps wasn't for Anatomy of a Movie, I don't think I've ever would have seen this movie.
Seriously?
Perhaps.
Wow.
But I enjoyed it. It was fun.
I mean, I want to ask you something too, because another thing that I sort of had with this one is it played a lot more for lack of better words, I think cartoony could be the right word, than previous films, meaning
The guillotine
it seemed to play a lot more for kids.
Yeah.
You know, the audience that I saw it with, I went on a Saturday morning at about 10:30 show. And number one, I saw this in XD with Dolby Atmos. All the money was up on screen again. It looked beautiful and it sounded amazing. Where I was more amazed is how many kids were in the theater and actually applauding the movie. Through various stages. Like, they knew beat for beat, like, the characters. When Orlando Bloom shows up, there was applause. When Keira Knightley shows up at the end, and I'm not kidding, like, I was like, huh? Really? I said, wow. I was
cheering for
surprised.
a different reason than the kids.
Well, but I mean, no, so I don't know if there were a lot of kids in your audience, but there were more kids in my audience that I saw this movie with than, say, the past 4 times I went to go see these pirate movies. So I don't know what your audience makeup was.
I think I went randomly, so I forget when I went. It was somewhat filled. I think I got there and the lights were already down, so I didn't take a look. I just kind of found my seat. But you know, I see the appeal of it, and that's part of what I enjoyed about it. There was a very good mix for me of humor and story, and I like adventure. I like, you know, Indiana Jones. I like, you know, I grew up watching Scooby-Doo and all these various aspects. And
same here.
I grew up watching Tom and Jerry, and so I don't mind those aspects. You know, Who Framed Roger Rabbit was kind of a big mainstream of being able to marry adult with comedy. Obviously in a very cartoonish still way.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I was on par with it. You know, I've read people's criticism of this movie. I agree in many ways. Like, Captain Jack he's just a figurehead. He's not, to me, he doesn't obviously do much.
Yeah.
So I get that criticism overall, but again, I didn't necessarily mind it.
You know, and it's like I said at the top too, when you look at these movies, Jack Sparrow, Captain Jack Sparrow is he's just a character who's embroiled in this, who gets wrapped up in this, trying to angle out a way in which he can come out ahead. And it's very interesting that he's really not the main character. He's a character that the other characters may need for a means to an end. Now, some people have said that Jack Sparrow never learns, and I will argue against that, because there's an amazing pivotal moment in Dead Man's Chest, the second Pirates movie, in which he has the opportunity to escape. And he changes his mind, and he comes back to a boat to help. So he does grow along with Will and Elizabeth, okay? So I do argue that the character, there is somewhat of a heart in him, that he has a teeny bit of a moral compass. But you're right. He's never, they're seeking Jack out, because Jack knows where they can get this trident. It's not like Jack's just trying to get another crew together. He's always looking for a crew in a ship. And he's not really the main character, but because it's Johnny Depp and because he's made this character his, nobody else could ever fill these shoes. We watch him. He's a pleasure to watch on screen. He's funny. But you're right. He's not really the person that we're following who's going to have that arc that we're always used to. It's usually the people around him who do that.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, yeah. Believe it or not, for me, Peter Pan is very much a story. Even though he's the title character, Peter Pan is not the main focal point. To me, it's Wendy.
It's Wendy. I agree.
So much in that same way, it's just he's just kind of the figurehead, but the real story is something else entirely, which in this case is the story of them.
Yeah. Absolutely. I agree.
So let's take a quick step back, and then we'll get back into story. Overall, though it may be the shortest movie of the franchise, the longest to make and get on screen. Pre-production started shortly after on Stranger Tides back in 2011, and from there it just kind of turned into various nightmares where Disney wasn't necessarily happy with the script and so on and so forth. Furthermore, if you want, we can certainly talk about it. When The Lone Ranger came out, Disney started doubting, okay, is this a Depp thing? Is he not bankable anymore? What's going on there? But then slowly but surely, in around 2013, Alan Horn came out and stated, we haven't seen a screenplay yet that I've been able to sign off on. There's a lot of variables that affect the final outcome once it leaves the studio lot, so we are very careful. And overall they were. Jeremy Bruckheimer, he was continued to be part of the process. And he said, we want a script that everyone's signed off on and a budget that everyone's happy with.
Right.
So that's what they went after. And slowly but surely, even though, then as you mentioned, Jeff Nathanson, he got hired and he started writing. Part and parcel of that was the search for the directors.
Yes.
Or at least a director, and ended up being two of them. And then they kind of worked together to create these various things.
Yeah. And I love this story about the directors. And, this movie, too, and again, I guess, if you're a fan and you've watched all the movies, this one movie in particular, I said it earlier, it just seemed that Nathanson had plot threads, and he was trying to incorporate as much as possible. I think that's evident in this movie, because there is lots going on. But the movie was plagued with a lot of things going on, from personal issues that Johnny Depp was going through at the time of filming this movie. Don't necessarily need to relay them. They were all over the news, what was happening in his life at the time. And while he did show up to work, they were having trouble with him on
they had a production assistant outside of his house being like, "Oh, he's up.
Could you imagine? I mean,
this is. I mean, it does have. It's Hollywood stories.
It's a Hollywood story. That guy was outside his house waiting for a light to turn on. That would be the only way he knew whether or not he's up. So there are stories like that, and then of course there's the story about this movie was supposed to come out a year ago, and Disney, who had a full slate of Marvel, Star Wars, Pixar, they had movies to promote, and this one had to wait on the runway, so to speak, and they actually pulled it out of release. It was supposed to come out in 2016. Usually, in that case, you'll agree, whenever you hear about that, it's like, oh boy, that's not a good sign. My only reaffirmation that they had somewhat of faith in this movie is that, A, when they picked its date, they picked it on Memorial Day weekend. It's a summer date. And I think by moving it to, Disney felt comfortable that they can put a lot of time, effort, give it tender loving care when it comes from a marketing push. And they did market the hell out of this movie. And the cast...
it went everywhere.
It went everywhere. They had premieres all over the world, Shanghai. They went everywhere. Which is great, because that means the cast was supporting it too. And that's another thing. We'll talk about cast, but everybody really seemed to be proud to either be returning to their roles or to be the newbies on board and just having a good time. So, but yeah, the movie was plagued with a lot of issues. It's almost amazing to me. You could do a documentary maybe about the making of this movie, and I think that would be fascinating. Just through all those iterations, and that's a true Hollywood story. So the fact that this was made at all.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Obviously, I think any movie overall goes through various things. But it's to that point, you just start to feel the pressure of, okay, you're putting out a movie that people love. The last one didn't do so well. And so you wanted to right the ship, if you will. Don't pardon the pun, whatever you want. And so, you just get to that point. Eventually the balance is it has to still be a creative exercise, but in the back of your mind, you're like, I don't want to mess this up.
Right.
And so you kind of have to be, to toe that line. I've had to do it at certain points, but nowhere near where I can say anywhere close to this level.
Yeah. I agree, and you're right. I mean, there was a lot of pressure. And again, a lot of credit must be given to Jerry Bruckheimer. This is a guy that has been in this business forever. He's been entertaining us with movies. And his passion for pirates, obviously, is, if he's considering going on and moving on to to do a fifth movie, that says something. And he's a producer that stands by. He's a producer that stands by his movie. And even according to him, it's like he loves this business, and he's involved in pretty much every aspect of the movie. The one aspect that he is quoted as saying that he hates the most is location scouting. He goes, I hate being in a stupid Jeep driving around. He goes, I let them do it. Let them get back to me. But he likes to be involved in the casting and production and the screenwriting and the script. So he really is the captain of the ship. And whether or not we get another one, I think, is ultimately going to be up to him and Alan Horn and Disney, of course. But I think it is a telling tale when, Bruckheimer has to say, yeah, we had to wait in line. Like, it's no longer the franchise that they would be willing to make a 3-hour movie at now, and with the Lone Ranger, which was Gore Verbinski, as well. So yeah, I think that they go in, a little bit with some trepidation, like what's this going to mean for us? And it's tough now because Disney now as a corporation, when you have Lucasfilms, when you have Marvel films, when you have Pixar and their other animated, it's tough to shoehorn something else into the mix for them. It really is. Like, you're not going to see a whole hell of a lot of original content. And by original, I mean a brand new, fresh movie and story from Disney. I mean, outside of, they might do new Pixar stories, but even now we're like, we're Finding Dory, Cars 3. Like, they're going back to the well. We're not, Moana was a new story. That was last year, right?
But so, was that Disney?
Yeah, Moana was Disney. So I just find it, they're so jam-packed with their franchises that, again, the mere fact, trying to shoehorn this in, but they gave it the respect that it needed as far as putting the money and picking what could be a very competitive date.
I mean, to that same token, their estimating budget is $230 million, and many sources are estimating the overall marketing and everything budget $400 million. That marketing budget is more than most movies get for everything. That's
an incredible budget, because I would have guesstimated it not at 400, but when you got to figure
this is Hollywood Reporter came out with that number, give or take
400. I mean, that in many studios could make a movies for a year and a half, 2 years, $400 million. Think about it.
Yes.
I mean,
Blumhouse could, they'd be funded for the next 40 years.
Yeah. I mean, and then when we talked about Alien Covenant, that came in at just under $70 million. So, $400 million, that's a lot of moolah. That's a lot of pirates' booty. That's a lot of, it's a lot of gold. So, and you got to try to mitigate like that. But obviously they put their money where their mouth is, and we'll talk about, I guess, gross a little bit later on.
Certainly.
But,
So let's take a quick, in terms of the directors, they spoke highly of Jeff, who was the writer. They said the script that it was funny and touching. It was a funny and touching script that they were inspired by the first film, and that the original is scary. It's funny, and most of all, it's got comedy. but with great heart, and the dynamics between the characters was something they really wanted to try to reinvent in this one. And so, that's kind of what they're going for. Orlando Bloom has even called it like this is a soft reboot.
Sure, yeah.
In a way. Which, I get that sentiment.
Yeah, and to their credit, they even admit the movie didn't fall into their laps. They actually sort of kind of had to chase it because they really wanted to make this movie. What I love about these guys, the basic reason, they started making movies together when they were 10 years old. I love this story. Okay. So there were 10 and movies that inspired them were the kind of movies that inspired me to want to talk about movies. And those were from Spielberg and Lucas and Zemeckis movies, And in a sense, too, the franchise is very much like that kind of entertainment. And that's why when that first movie comes out, and it is really so good and entertaining, and I believe Johnny Depp was nominated that year too. Nobody expected this movie to do what it did and be as good and as humorous and fun. So I really, really enjoyed the energy that they brought to it. It does, in a sense, I guess Orlando Bloom calling it a soft reboot, I guess it sort of kind of makes sense. It'll be interesting, though, because, again, to me, the people that were great were Orlando Bloom and Keira Knightley. And when they finished filming at World's End, they actually did Dead Man's Chest. Actually, they took a page from because Robert Zemeckis more or less sort of kind of invented this when he did Back to the Future 2 and 3. He filmed them back to back because he didn't want to lose his actors. And the same thing went on here. They did Dead Man's Chest and at World's End pretty much back to back. And Keira Knightley was pretty much, look, I love these movies and what it's afforded me, and I love the people I've worked with, but it was 5 years of my life. Like, I don't want to be tied down to doing that. So it'll be interesting if she'll show up again in a movie and how many they may or may not have planned. Listen, if they do one more and they're in it and that ends up being the final one, then, you have my blessing and peace. You've done your bit for King and Queen. If they end on this one, I'd be the same way. I'd be, you know what? You gave me Elizabeth and Will. You've done your bit for King and Queen. You've entertained, and for the most part, it's been solid entertainment.
Yeah.
But it's tough. It'll be tough to get that cast back together again, I think.
Absolutely.
And we already know that Barbossa's not coming back.
That he is not.
So,
And, one of the things you had made mention of it, and so I want to kind of talk about it now because, in writing, one of the biggest decisions for them was the compass, right? And so, as they stated, there's a mythical MacGuffin in this movie in the shape of Jack's compass, which they describe as the hardest nut to crack from a story point of view. A key element from the very start of Pirates series, the compass famously does not point north, instead pointing to the thing that you want most in the world. But figuring it into the script and how it related to Salazar took some time during development. Quote, we needed some kind of key to unlock Salazar from his hellish prison in the Triangle. That's where it started. What kind of tools do we have? The compass is one of the most prominent gadgets that Jack had, so we wanted we started from there. It took a long time to solve it. Mm-hmm. So again, whether or not they actually figured it out in the right way, at least I guess they did think about it.
Yeah, again, that compass and Jack Sparrow are things that everybody was trying to get their hands on in the previous movies because it would bring them or point them to whatever it was they wanted the most. So, there was a time he even gave it to Elizabeth Swann because for whatever reason, Jack didn't know what he wanted truly, so it wasn't pointing. But he knew that if he followed Elizabeth, that would take him to what so he'd given it to her. But then the East India Trading Company wanted it so that they could hunt down pirates. And then it ended up in Orlando Bloom or Davy Jones would have. It changed hands a bunch because of the MacGuffin, as you call it. Because it doesn't turn north. It also was a butt into jokes. It's like, what's he do? Like he's using a compass that doesn't point north. Well, how the hell does he do it? So I appreciate giving us backstory, and I did like that backstory because it did show us a self-assured Jack Sparrow, and that's when that character really works, because the way Depp plays him, and it's said a couple of times in the previous movies, is he just mad? Like, do you think he has a plan, or does he just make shit up as he goes along? And like, because that's the way he plays the character. And in this movie, when we're going back, and number one, we'll talk about the what they did, the face. I like that scene because he takes over for his captain who died, and he hands the compass to him. He says, "It's yours now. You're Captain Jack." And he became very self-assured, and he tried a plan that was crazy to do to escape the Devil's Triangle and from Salazar, who to me appeared as if he were with either the East India Trading Company or they were hunting down pirates, basically. So I liked our seeing Jack take command and so self-assured in a sense, and having that Shipwreck and Salazar going left like, what the hell? Like, how did he do that?
For me, it was just a matter of like, what else is he gonna do? I mean, he's a young, arrogant, like, the other pirates have been killed. He's got nothing to lose, so why not just go for it?
Yeah,
that's the way I read it. Interestingly enough, I know this is jumping ahead, but I don't want to lose the thought. I'm surprised critics haven't made fun of, how Jack always wants his pirates to pay him for the privilege of saving his life and all that.
Yeah.
I'm surprised no critic has made that joke in terms of what pirates just say.
I gotcha, yeah. That's a new plot thread. Like, through the period, he's never, I forget the word tribute.
Tribute,
right?
yeah.
You have to pay me tribute. Again, that was something new, but new into the fold of piracy and of Jack Sparrow, because in all the other movies, Barbossa, we'd never seen all the other pirates say that to their crew or whatnot. So that seemed to be new to this. That was fine. But he's always Jack Sparrow since the beginning. Curse of the Black Pearl, he's always in search of crew and ship, particularly the Black Pearl. That's his ship. That's the one. That's his home. So it's interesting to see it come out of the bottle, so to speak, literally. Great scene. Yeah. And if you're following the movies, it ends with Jack holding the ship in a bottle. So it was good to see the Black Pearl coming up again. There are other aspects of the crew that, again, if you've been following the movies, the short guy who's always been part of the crew, he was there. Of course, Gibbs. You need Gibbs, too, because he's the one who supports Jack. And we had Barbossa. Barbossa's been a constant thread as well. So, and these are the people that he works best with.
So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
For me, the first introduction for Jack Sparrow in actual film, for me, was obviously when they go to rob the bank. And so, I mean, I've had a chance to kind of watch a little bit of the first one, but obviously there's a huge chunk in between then and where he ends up then. And so, is that an accurate representation of where we left off with him, or was this here we're catching up with him and this is just kind of he's fallen to the bottom of the barrel?
Well, it was of no surprise that here we are at this brand new bank that's supposed to have the best safe in the world, and when they open it up, it's Captain Jack Sparrow along with a woman in the safe. And he's awakened by these people, and he's always like, hey, what the hell are you doing, And then we find out that the woman he's sleeping with is the mayor's
the head person's wife.
Yeah, that person's wife. Again, no surprise, right? But then we had our Fast and Furious moment. That's what I call it, right? Because they take the safe that's hooked up to about 12 horses or so.
I mean, at least Fast and the Furious has a little bit more physics than this had, right? Even though I enjoyed this.
Yeah, it was fun. This is where it was a little bit cartoony for me. it's a fun scene to watch, and it's fun to see Jack on top of this bank house because it's not just taking the safe, it's the whole thing as we see it going down the street. It's a fun scene to watch. Again, it seemed to be a little bit more cartoony than, say, past films. Look, when Gore Verbinski and they were sitting down to make the first Pirates movie, and they bring Depp aboard, Depp played it. He was his child was watching Pepe Le Pew, and he's a big rock and roll fan as well. So he sort of kind of zeroed in on Pepe Le Pew, and Keith Richards was a major influence as well. And when he was doing this sort of kind of Jack Sparrow-y, Keith Richards-y thing, and they were sending the dailies back, people at Disney were like, what the F is he doing? Like, what is happening? Jesus. And they came on set, and they were talking to Gore Verbinski, and they said, he's got it. He's got to rein. No, we can't have this because it's not going to work. Like, there was big trouble on the set, and Gore Verbinski's like, he stood by him. They stood by him, and Bruckheimer, they were saying, nope, just let it, it's going to play out. Thank God that they changed those executives' minds, because he ends up giving one of the most original performances of Jack Sparrow. And even for an audience member, he always sort of kind of, because of the way he's playing it, like, you don't know whether or not he's actually daft or is he way smart. He always seems to be a step ahead. But is it because of luck, chance? It's a little bit of everything, but there is some planning going on with him. So it's going back to your question, yes, this is where Jack has left off. He's always been that kind of way, and he'll get out of a situation without maybe not having all the pieces of the plan put together, but he's going to go for it anyways. And that's why I really think that Captain Jack Sparrow has just been, from a cinematic standpoint, Johnny Depp has given us an iconic character. There's a reason why they've added that character to the ride, to Pirates of the Caribbean. He is as much a part of Pirates of the Caribbean as the ride is to Disneyland. And he will even show up. He did that as the marketing thing, which I think is great. He loves this character and what he breathed life into this character. And I do believe, if we can look it up, I believe he was nominated for the first movie, for his portrayal of this. And I can't imagine the portrayal being done by anybody else. And thank God those execs' opinions
went away, yeah.
Didn't change his performance.
Well, what I loved about it was, again, you kind of showcase him in terms of the arrogance and all the other things. And overall, as a plan, it does work, except that you have that great button of like, okay, there's nothing in the safe except for the last coin, which he takes. Which is a complete Jack Sparrow thing. So in that sense, it's great that it worked. It just didn't work in the way intended.
Right.
So I thought it set it up very nicely. And again, if that's what to me separates it, like, you had made mention of the Fast and the Furious, right? The separation why that scene did work to me, despite all of its physics and everything, was the fact that he didn't come out on top.
Right.
If they did this, and I would have been like, okay, come on.
Right.
But it obviously is a foil to him more so than anything.
It's another common thread through the movies too, where he says something to the effect of, well, that didn't go as planned, or that could have gone better, or something. But at the same time, like somebody said, there was a scene, and I think it could have been World's End or whatever, and go, are you mad? And he goes, well, if I wasn't mad, then this stupid idea wouldn't work at all. And he cuts a rope and he goes flying on the air. So he embraces his madness. And again, Keith Richards was in the movies as well. Was he in this one for like 2 seconds?
No.
He was in Stranger Tides for like 2 seconds. So he brought on his idol to be in the movies, and and his character's even made fun of. Orlando Bloom was like, well, is that why he's all like this? So again, he's made such an iconic character that he's somebody that I will continually like to follow. So if they make another one, I'm going to be there because of Johnny Depp's Captain Jack Sparrow.
Well, let's, one of the things you made mention of was that you liked Orlando Bloom and his son. So let's talk about the inciting incident, because it's what really sets it up. I mean, truthfully, I don't know the full time, but let's say for the first 10 to 15 minutes, before the title even comes up,
Right.
we're with him. And we're getting that, we're setting up that story first and foremost, which I thought, I thought it worked well. Because it gave us a chance to kind of really digest, okay, what's really the emotional core here.
Right.
And I forget, I forget how exactly, I think we meet her first before we even see, we meet her
Right.
before we meet Captain Jack.
Right.
So we get, in terms of emotional investment, we meet the characters we need to meet before we meet Jack Sparrow.
And what I liked about Karina Smith, too, is that we meet her because she's in prison and she's going to be killed for being a quote-unquote witch, okay? The point, we don't quite understand what her witch powers are, but when we learn it's just because she knows how to read the stars, horology, and she's smart. She's a smart woman. And you go, okay, but in that time, okay, I can see, what that is. But Kaya Scodelario, I butchered that last name. She was great as Karina Smith. I really liked her presence in this movie. And then she comes across Brenton Thwaites, who plays Henry Turner. And I like, again, right there, they're sort of kind of setting us up because these are the new Orlando Bloom, Keira Knightley people. I think they were a decent matching. But I particularly like the story of a son who knows of his father's curse, and he wants to end the curse. In the previous films, in the first three, the through line was Orlando Bloom's character, his father, Bootstrap Turner, who was a crew member of Captain Jack Sparrow. He was on the Flying Dutchman, okay? And he was cursed. He was a cursed pirate on that ship, and he had promised to throughout the movies, Will Turner is learning that he does have piracy in his blood, and he wants to free his dad from the curse. He's not talking about ending the curse. He just wants his dad out of the curse. Henry Turner's is a bigger goal because he just wants to end the curse, period. And then this way, because the curse, I don't know if you got it from the movie, the person who is captaining the Flying Dutchman is not allowed to come to shore not but once every 10 years. Okay. Now, there's another inconsistency too, because at World's End, there's a scene where Davy Jones, who was captain of the Dutchman, was on a beach, but they had a bucket. He was in a bucket of seawater. He was standing on, so he's on shore technically, but in a bucket of seawater. He just wants his dad to come home, Henry Turner. And that to me is a very noble goal. I liked that. It's like, okay, the only way that I'm going to get from point A to point B is I need Jack Sparrow to do that for me. Yeah, he'll be able to.
If I had any knock on this movie, it's that I was so invested in Henry as a character, but in terms of his actual actionable steps and decisions from there, he really just had to rely on other people to get him to that place. Mm-hmm. Even though he says, I found you, Dad, and that's a huge undertaking. Now he's going to go off and find this trident. He's very much reliant on Karina and obviously Captain Jack and everyone else.
Right.
And so that part of it kind of, in hindsight did slightly annoy me.
Sure.
But it gave him time to develop that relationship, and I want to go back to her for a second.
Yeah.
Because in terms of character development, obviously we keep making the reference. It's Will and Elizabeth, but at the same time, in terms of who she was, they very much wanted to make a conscious decision that it's not just her. They want to modernize her and have her be sort of a modern woman, and I thought it worked well. And I just, me being a guy and maybe still a 5-year-old at heart, I just love the fact of You study horology? You're a horologist?
I know.
Oh. My mother was a horologist.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I like the character, because there was like she was like a nerd and geek before that was even a term, right? And they do make her different. Like she could have been like that character could have been the daughter of Will Turner and Elizabeth. Okay,
Although weird.
No.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying because throughout Keira Knightley as Elizabeth. Two, was a great female character. I mean, she ends up becoming captain of a ship at World's End through various circumstances. But even in the first movie, there's a scene where her father buys her this dress, and it's this corset, and she just does not want any part of this. And she is a strong woman character who can as easily match wits with Captain Jack Sparrow, and that there was a little love triangle going on there that really sizzles, in a sense, those movies. This one, yes, you're right. It's years after. It's 10 years after World's End. So even in that society, lots have changed. But I love that Karina Smith was an horologist. I love that she could point out the stars. That scene where she goes, the guy who has the huge telescope.
Yeah, at the beginning.
Yeah, no woman has ever touched my Herschel, I think the line was. She just knew, but your lens is off. Like, I can fix this for you. And the man was so afraid that she was more knowledgeable about his Herschel than he was. But I really like that. She goes, yeah, if you fix this, then you'll be able to see the star that you're looking at, and it's right up over there. And I'm like, yeah, that's sort of cool. Yeah. It's cool. She was attractive. She had the gumption. I liked. She was a good character. She was a good addition to the pirates' stories.
And they had that fine balance act, because right in that scene, then Captain Jack shows up and he's like, "Oh, you have a pirate and a witch here. Oh, that must be a good day." So they overall they were able to find that balance with them. I mean, let me ask this in terms of, at this point, it's just such a cliche trope, in a sense, to have the two, a guy and a girl, or whatever couple, I guess, can play it, we live in a modern age. But the fact of, oh, I don't love you, you don't love me, it's just, is that somewhat overplayed? I mean, it was fun to watch overall. I thought they did enough clever things to hide the fact. Or not hide the fact, but just play with that trope. But nonetheless, there's no doubt in anyone's mind that they're ending up together.
No, and I don't know how you get around it in this movie, because that certainly wasn't necessarily... you can't say the same thing about Will and Elizabeth. There was an attraction there. The two in their hearts knew that they wanted to be together. It was actually the social system that they were in that was initially keeping them apart. So this one, it's got to be, it's the opposites attract. I'm way more smarter than you are. You're like, who are you? What are you, a blacksmith? Like, I can't be, stuff like that. But they're good for each other. I thought as actors, I felt their chemistry was really good for one another as well, because the scene where it's a great scene. The hanging, okay? So she's being hung. Jack's about to be decapitated by the guillotine, the brand new machine on the market by the French. Oh, if it's French. That was a good line. Oh, if it's French, it's got to, let me do the French thing. But when she falls through and he holds her, and she says something to the effect of, it was a really funny line. It's like, well, you're becoming to know me a little bit more by holding my port side, or something like that. It was really funny. It worked. Yeah. So I enjoyed watching them together and trying to get through this, to go through this adventure. Well, let me ask you this. What was your take? See, to me, it was Henry's story was the one that was important to me. Karina, what did you think about her story?
The search for the dad?
The search for the dad.
Yeah, I mean, because at that point we sort of because Henry was not as active as at that point she was. I started becoming a little bit more vested in her. Like, it's not that her story was necessarily the best, but because he was so inactive, it just kind of brought him on that same level. And if nothing else, I guess you could say I applaud them for switching gears and making and focusing on them and their quest together rather than their individual goals. Even though they kept saying their individual goals, it was more about like, oh, you're just actually forming a relationship.
So then I'm going to ask too, because there's an interesting story from Jeffrey Rush too about what were your thoughts on the reveal that it's Barbossa is her father.
What I liked,
for someone who's not familiar with the franchise at all.
Yeah, I mean it sort of, for me, it came out of left field, as I'm reading for most people. However, what I did like about it was the fact that it wasn't, oh my God, we know the secret, and now as an audience we're going to hold on to it till it needs to be said later. 2 seconds after we find out, or at least I found out, he's talking with Jack, and Jack's like, come on, she's your daughter. Come on, how could you have a daughter like that? So so they were able to play with it, not hold it hostage, as I've seen most movies have to do.
Yeah, and according to Jeffrey Rush, they had wanted to incorporate some additional dialogue in that cajoling scene too, because again, this is giving us some more information about their younger years, which again, I'm all for. I mean, I think that they're really great cinematic characters, and basically Johnny is trusted up against the mast and teasing me, Hector says. We'll take this to our graves. And he said he had a line where he said, I remember that night. We were in a tavern. It was an appalling sight where you were naked and dancing on the table drunk. It didn't make it into the film. But Jeffrey Rush says, I always love that image of Jack and Hector being wild boys in their youth, off their heads on rum, and then a child comes out of that. That, to me, again, I'm wondering what was the deciding factor to maybe take that out of the movie, because to me, then that makes more sense.
It makes more sense, but it reveals it. More so. Right? I mean, it doesn't... Because when they end up on the ship all together, it's a little bit later in the movie. So... Again, I think it's a neat... I think it does tie it up, and I think it's very cool. If something like that, like a scene like that, would have been great to see in an earlier movie of the Pirates, because then it sets this up even nicer. But to see it in the same movie, I would have felt she'd have like, he's the dad. And now I'm just waiting for the point in time. And that's why I did like it in this sense, because we find out as an audience member, you're like, okay, what are they going to do with it? Oh, 30 seconds later, they're already talking about it.
Yeah, okay. I mean, because to me it was a story of maybe learning a little bit more that Hector and Jack were. I mean, they were always antagonistic of one another because, they're always in competition over the Black Pearl, who's going to be captain, and you got to see the other movies, because there's a reason why it's called Curse of the Black Pearl, and that why Captain Jack Sparrow isn't a part of that curse, and so on and so forth. But I don't know. I was reading about that line going, to me, that's a great line, because they were off their heads on rum. And, the way that it was played up, it was getting to a point where you sort of kind of knew, again, if you're watching these movies, and we only have so many characters in this movie. So it really wasn't going to be Salazar, right? Because he'd been a ghost for many years. Probably wasn't going to be Johnny. It probably wasn't going to be Captain Jack Sparrow, right? So just by pure math and the number of characters, it was sort of, to point of Barbossa, he seemed to be making the only sense of like...
Well, I guess in some sense the poster gives it away, huh?
Sort of, kind of, yeah. I guess, sure, yep.
She's on his right-hand side.
Yeah, and I'm gonna say too, This time I think dead is dead. And Jeffrey Rush, even says, yeah, I'm pretty sure, unless he comes back as a ghost now to haunt Jack, or to keep needling him. What's interesting about a lot of this too is when he was filming this movie, he was also doing Hamlet.
Yes.
And he was going back and forth. So he would come in, get dressed up as a pirate, do pirate talk. And then his joke was, he goes, and then when I was done, he goes, or you could see me in the docks and like my shorts, and I'd be talking Shakespeare and stuff. And then he'd come back and do more pirate stuff. But he made mention that maybe he'll come back as Hamlet, as like sort of kind of like Hamlet's dad ghost. He goes, I'll come back and needle Jack as a ghost, but I can't see me coming back to the franchise. Which, I'm a little bit bummed. He was great. And let me tell you something. In Dead Man's Chest, the second pirate movie, he dies at the end of Curse of the Black Pearl. Sorry, I know it's a spoiler. You haven't seen these.
It's fine, yeah.
When he shows up at the end, the button on Dead Man's Chest, that was like one of those like, awesome. It's like, whoa, what the hell? Like, what just happened? It was great to see him back, and he was always this cool character. He was a lot of fun in Stranger Tides too. So if they are going to continue, they're going to need either Will and Elizabeth or somebody else to step up in Jeffrey Rush's shoes, because I think he too has become such a part and a rock in these movies. So I was a little bit bummed to see him go, because this one did seem definitive to me.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
But, kind of almost going like the guillotine back and forth. Brenton Thate says, you made mention, okay, we're going to need one of these characters to step up. Well, it seems like Kea can do it. He says, what I loved about Kea was that she wasn't afraid to share ideas. That kind of confidence, conviction, and fearlessness saves a lot of time. You can get right to the meat of the scene that's happening, and it's nice to work like that. So, if she had already confidence going into a franchise like this and being able to be open, then now, perhaps for a second movie, obviously she'll feel even more comfortable.
Yeah.
And so can step into that role and take that mantle, if you will.
Yeah.
So
it would be good to have a female captain now. A little bit of Pirates of the Caribbean trivia. In the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie, there was in fact a female captain who was duped by Jack, but was promised a ship, no less, and that was played by Zoe Saldana. A very young Zoe Saldana, I might add. It was the only appearance she made in these Pirates movies, but she was and played part of Jack's crew in Curse of the Black Pearl, and she went on to be a female captain. I think it would be fun to have a strong female captain. Keira Knightley had her fill, or Elizabeth Swann had her fill of piracy, and she's been around pirates a lot. But I think this new character, obviously, she can, all I need is a tall ship and a star to guide her by. And she can do that, and she's a strong, smart, fun character. I'd like to see her mix it up with Captain Jack again. Yeah. That would be fun.
So let's talk about one of, as much as we talked about the compass being MacGuffin, the ultimate MacGuffin is this trident.
Sure.
This is the thing that cures all ails.
Right.
Anybody and everybody who's got something, come on down.
Yep.
The trident will solve it. But what did you think? I mean, first off, the trident itself did not look anything like a trident that I would have ever imagined.
Sure.
Which, for better or worse, I'm just noting in that.
Yeah, I sort of kind of likened it to what the Holy Grail was in Last Crusade. It's not what we always picture the Holy Grail to look like. In this movie, I like the liberties that they took with this trident, because it doesn't look anything really, mega spectacular. But again, I like the story, and you're right in the sense that it is a MacGuffin. However, and it's the be all end all, right? Which, again,
we'll talk about the repercussions of
right.
things.
But I appreciate the fact, like, it's a good MacGuffin. It's a good element to hunt for because, again, it's treasure. You know, there's always this like Stranger Times was all about Ponce de Leon and finding the Fountain of Youth, okay? Which to me, that's a good story. That's a story that I can see, that I can not only see like Indiana Jones being a part of in an Indiana Jones adventure, but I can see piracy. I can see Captain Jack Sparrow, like searching for the, you know, being part of the search for the Fountain of Youth. And in this movie, this trident, being that he can know where it is, I liked the idea of this breaking the curse. You know, he wants his dad back. And if the trident, the unfindable object, you know, is the thing, and he believes he can find it, and he's on a quest. He's on a journey for the Holy Grail, in a sense. He just wants his dad to come home. So I liked that aspect of the movie, that the unfindable object is the one thing that he needs to find.
Well, you know, where I did get worried, you know, I didn't know the extent of all the curses, but just even the curses that the movie presented were a lot. Mm-hmm. And so I imagine in this world, curses are an everyday thing. There's a curse a day, if you will. And so yes. It worried me, if the trident fixes all curses, we've essentially created Armageddon.
Yeah.
To a lesser extent. Sure.
And that, again, too, is it just makes me wonder how much thought was put into, like, because it would be interesting if, instead of it doing all curses, like, it depends on who it strikes, or I don't know. It just seemed, because this frees Salazar. Salazar is no longer a god. I mean, it does it wipes out almost everything, and it also can bring people back from the dead. So it just goes to one of those story elements that I'm not sure how far out they were thinking of it, mm-hmm. and they made this MacGuffin. It was the magic bullet, yeah. so to speak, that's going to cure everything, and so you sort of kind of have to buy into it because it's going to end Salazar's reign, and it's going to cure his dad and every other pirate that was cursed.
What did you think of in terms of having to break it? Because the trident itself is a very powerful entity, right. And you know, when wielded, it's a weapon.
Right.
When broken,
you know, again, it's one of those things. I think it's you got to break. It's a one-shot deal. Mm-hmm. You got to use it right, because you're never going to have the opportunity again. So they can't go back into the well. Like, if something else happens. So they've already broken this. So if, quote unquote, Davy Jones showing up, which is what they were alluding to at the button at the end of this movie, a trident, the broken trident, it's already been used. We can't use this again. They broke it.
But if you break the trident and breaks all curses, then does that reset the trident?
I don't know.
Stupid question, but you can imagine this being in a writer's room for the next one, being like, well, maybe.
I don't think it was, though. Like, that's the thing. I don't think that there was this kind of thought, like, to try to write around this, or to try to fix it so that we couldn't have this conversation. Mm-hmm. Because somehow, well, if it lifts the curse, then Davy Jones shouldn't be Davy Jones. Like, we shouldn't have him again. But somehow he's come back to haunt Will and Elizabeth. So, you know, I like the idea of an object that can do this. But, and again, taking it back to Last Crusade, if you remember correctly, look, Indy could have drinking from this, but he saved his dad. And then the cup, the chalice, falls through a crack because the temple was falling down.
They tried to take it away.
They tried to take it away, but it's lost forever. In a sense, the trident is lost forever. Like, we can't. It's gone. We can't use it. They did the same thing with the Fountain of Youth. You know, the Spaniards come and say, this is blasphemy against Christianity. No one should have it. They bring ruins down upon it. There was only enough for one drop, or a few drops, and then the Fountain of Youth is lost forever. It's all dried up. Can't use it again. So it's a common trope as
in
we're
movies, yeah.
as we're proving. It's the magic bullet that once shot and fired, you can't use it again. No more reset buttons.
Wow. I don't know. Sometimes you'd be surprised, I guess.
Yeah, I know.
So, but yeah, I mean, I just wanted to bring that up, especially because, you know, even for someone who doesn't know the franchise, it's like, this can't be good.
Yeah.
Any other story elements that, well, I guess, sorry, we should talk about definitely location in terms of, and not in terms of production, but just favorite location in the movie and then favorite action scene as well.
I mean, Australia looked beautiful. I thought they mostly used Hawaii again because that's pretty much where a lot of Stranger Tides was filmed. But I felt that their locations were, and they always look beautiful. They always look to fit the movie and give it that sense of the time in which pirates may have existed or pirates existed. Okay, because they did exist. And it also, in a sense, if you're a fan of Disney and you do the attraction as many times as I do, I'm an annual pass holder, so the locations seem to fit what the attraction looks like as well, whether it's in a prison or whether you're going through a village in a town, they seem to match up like they're almost seamless. Mm-hmm. And I think that they do a wonderful job in doing that. But I know that they filmed in Australia.
Yeah, because it's tax incentive.
Right, which is fantastic. Action sequences, definitely 2 for me. I mean, for sure, the guillotine sequence was very inspired, I felt, because they actually...
Maybe it was me, but I thought it was a little sadistic. Because you're like, wow, you're like, holy Jesus.
And they actually had him on, I don't even know if you could call it a gimbal, but he was spinning around and they had the camera on him. Now, I think, number one, kudos for Johnny Depp. He didn't get sick, apparently. He was all for it when he figured out what it was, all for it. The way that it was shot, that's like inspired mayhem and genius, because you would think that things could go all wrong. Now, obviously, it's not a real guillotine, so had something happened that's not cutting off his head. But the appearance-wise I just love the up and down of it all. It was a fun scene. I also love the shark scene.
That was fun. Yeah,
that was a fun scene.
They were very specific to put in zombie sharks.
Sharks.
So I enjoyed that quite a bit. And you know, I'm iffy on whether or not I like the ship as like this skeleton thing that just eats another ship.
Right.
But the zombie sharks for sure.
The zombie sharks are
one of the better
great.
parts of the movie.
Yeah, I agree. They were just a lot of fun, and to see them underwater. And this is a part where I wasn't annoyed by slow motion either. Like when the sharks jump out, I actually got to see the detail of both the inside and the outside of these sharks, and I thought that was cool. When it jumps over the ship like Free Willy, you know, and it goes to take a bite out of them, I was like, oh, that's sort of cool. That was awesome. I really liked the shark sequence a lot. It was good stuff.
Yeah, I enjoyed that too.
It was somewhat inspired too. It's new. It was something new that I hadn't seen before either.
I mean, it takes our love of sharks and zombies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh man, better rewrite Sharknado.
Shark, no kidding.
By the way, I'm looking forward to that one. It's called Global Swarming.
It's gonna be awesome.
I'm very excited. August 4th, I believe.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit too about Javier Bardem. Okay.
Yes, indeed.
As our new villain, Salazar. I was on board from the trailer, and like the first time we see him, and he's looking for Jack Sparrow, and making him this ghost, and putting him in this makeup, which took about 3 hours. So his hair obviously was CG, but I thought it was very well done. I really liked it. Now, it's interesting because his wife, Penelope Cruz, was on Stranger Tides. And am I correct? Penelope Cruz was in Blow, right? With Johnny Depp.
Yes.
So obviously, I think there was a friendship there. Okay. So she's doing on Stranger Tides. She was pregnant at the time. And Javier Bardem had come to the set a few times, and what he said was he was always impressed that the care that they were focusing on his wife, Penelope, because she was pregnant of the making of the movie, and he was very happy about that. But and then added to that, he was amazed by the details on the set that he got to walk in. He's like, I felt like, he goes, I would pick up a book or something, and there would be detail carved into wood that we as the audience would never ever see, but they took the time to put it in there anyways. And he said he was so impressed. And when he was asked to do this movie, the first thing he did was he went to Penelope and said, hey, I had this possibility I could be a villain. Did you have what do you think? She goes, oh my God, are you kidding? She goes, I had the best time. She goes, you have to do it. And so it's funny that married couple, they play two villains in a sense. I don't know if Penelope Cruz is a villain, so to speak, but she plays off of Depp. She's probably, their chemistry is really good, but him coming on board because of his wife, I think that's a great story. And he just, and this is what I love about it. When you hear about these newbies on set, because you're filming, this is the 5th movie, right? So yeah. Barbosa, Gibbs, they're all family in a sense, okay? These new people on set, obviously Depp has to know Penelope Cruz and Javier Bardem. I mean, it's to some extent. I just think that I love hearing how, we just walked on set. It was a good time. It was work. It was good work. It was a lot of fun to be there. I love hearing that, because usually you can sense if maybe it wasn't such a good time, because they don't talk about it. They just don't talk about it. No. They'll talk about how good the movie is, but they won't talk about their good times working on set. So I'm glad that he played. He was a good villain. He was a good villain.
He was. I enjoyed him. I thought his backstory played well. Again, I thought the ship actually eating other ships was a little bit over the top, but other than that, I thought he as a character overall was grounded.
Yeah,
quite well.
Yeah, it was good stuff.
And I enjoyed the triangle, if you will. The backstory to that.
Yeah, the Devil's Triangle it's a lot of fun. It was really, I like the story behind that as well. In a sense, it's their Bermuda Triangle, except nobody's ever survived it. In a sense, so I liked how he became this ghost. That's the other cool thing about the Pirates movies, is that there's always this hint of the supernatural. Within these movies, whether they're curses or not. Davy Jones, that whole ship, the whole Davy Jones's locker, becoming captain of that ship. There's that touch of the supernatural, which is they always put in there, and I really enjoy what they do. Also we have Martin Kleba as Marty. He's Marty, he's the short gentleman, okay? Mm-hmm. He's been in all of these movies. Always fun to see. The gentleman who plays Gibbs has been in these movies as well. He's always fun to be paired up with Jack. Scrum, actually, Stephen Graham, he's a character that comes from Stranger Tides. And again, I'm glad that I got to watch all these movies now, because I was I remember watching this going, who is this guy? And then when I saw it, I was like, oh, okay, he comes from Stranger Tides. So I like how they do their best to keep these people, together as part of Jack's crew, and always finding things out. I guess my only thing is they seem to give up on him pretty quickly. When that whole thing, at the bank, it's but they come back to save him because they were paid. But that's, that's a pirate's life.
They're not always the smartest, as the movie points out.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we talked about him and his backstory.
And the makeup effect, and being that it was 3 hours of makeup he was going through a day, and then he had to wear a special cap, because that's the other thing I do appreciate. They did look, even when they were on land, they looked very ghostly, but they looked like ghosts from in the water. Yeah. I really thought that was really cool. It was a lot of fun to watch. And speaking of special effects too, the youngifying of our the youthification, as they called it, of Jack Sparrow. We're seeing this more and more in movies. The use of digital, whether we're creating old characters like Tarkin. I know that they specifically, in things that I read, specifically talked about Rogue One, but nobody talked about Kurt Russell in Guardians of the Galaxy Part 2, or Volume 2, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I don't think it was, I don't think it was out yet, perhaps, at the time.
Yeah, it might not have been out yet. But what's interesting that the directors go on to say is, it's like, well, for Princess Leia, they didn't shoot Carrie Fisher. But this one, Johnny Depp was there. He did actually have a stand-in, too, to use as he was young. And apparently Johnny Depp wasn't not 100% convinced that it was going to work until he walked on set and he saw his stand-in. And he was able to see what they could do. And he was like, holy shit. He's like, oh, okay, it's great. And they specifically went back to 21 Jump Street Johnny Depp, which is cool. I thought he looked, for the 5 minutes on screen, I thought it looked pretty good. It wasn't gratuitous. We only had that small shot.
I don't know. For me, I think because of Guardians of the Galaxy, because of Rogue One, I thought this one was done a little bit to a lesser extent. It wasn't quite as good, to be honest, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, and I would buy that. I think maybe, I don't know if it was budgetary or whatever. He wasn't on screen maybe as much. It could have been, like, they did a good job with Kurt Russell. Yeah. I'm going to say that they did a really good job with Kurt Russell. But I felt that, for the time that he was on screen, I was like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I think part of the problem, perhaps, I'd have to do a little bit more research, but this is just my guess at it. Kurt, he's in the woods, so it's not you're not getting the direct sunlight, so to speak. Obviously, Star Wars isn't the brightest of films, generally, right? So you're kind of inside the spaceships and so forth, so you're not getting the best, quote, lighting. Whereas Captain Jack, it was the middle of the day on an ocean with a bright sun.
Right.
So, his face was clear as day.
Yeah, and something? It's funny that you talk about that, because that was one of the challenges for the cinematographer, Cameron, who said that filming on a ship in daylight, they had to figure out lighting and grade the lighting as to whether or not, because you would go about, they were shooting like plates that aren't there yet. He goes, when you go back in post-production, the question was put to him, is there much alteration to match the new plates? And he was like, no, I think the general thing in terms of matching lighting ratios and looks, he's like, I had a methodology to maintain the correct look throughout a sequence, knowing where it's sea, as you're saying, it's going to be late afternoon, so a lighting ratio would be like something like 3-to-1 or 4-to-1. Something like that. Not a bright day. Well, he said a bright day could be 4-to-1, but there'd be diffuse clouds and things. So these are all the challenges that a cinematographer had to think about. And then trying to match that if they're on a ship, and then they did a scene that was on green screen, but at least they could have the template of when they're outside and manipulate on green screen. So to your point is correct. I mean, I think that was a very heavy challenge for them to try to even get that lighting correctly on his face. I don't think that the technology is quite there. The technology sort of frightens me just as a moviegoer. Not that the technology itself frightens me, but how far will Hollywood go with this? I mean, in Rogue One, they pretty much used, it was Governor Tarkin. It was Peter Cushing, who's been dead, sadly, for many years. And they put in a stand-in and they did everything digitally. And that character was in the movie for a chunk of the movie. One of the first times, they were doing this, there was made much ado. And we talked about the movie, it was Fast 7 with Paul Walker. And again, some of the scenes were just sort of kind of, it's eerie. Kurt Russell, I thought, looked really good. He sort of kind of reminded me back to his Big Trouble in Little China days. You know, and in this one, he's not on screen for a whole. Jack Sparrow, Johnny Depp, isn't on screen for a whole time, but you know, I just don't want it to be where they actually do, unless it's like a science fiction thing and they create a character. Like, I don't want them to use an actor who's been passed away and resurrect that performance.
Yeah, because ultimately it's not their performance. So
ultimately it's not, and it's just a little bit. It's, I don't know. It's just eerie to me. It's very ghost-like.
Yeah,
so to speak.
Yeah, I get that sentiment. I get where you're coming from.
So another thing that they worked on a lot too, believe it or not, was drone technology. They used a lot of drone technology in this, and so he, you know, again, the cinematographer was like, well, he recommended doing some of this, and traditionally for at sea, we'd be able to do an aerial shot coming from a mile out and swoop down by the ship and go by as oftentimes as you want. So maybe, you know, a CG trade-off with a crane shot we do in a boat or something. Is the good news with drones is he was able to take the ship a quarter of a mile out and fly it right into the ship and fly it right over into a close-up of Johnny Depp or another actor. So a quarter mile out. They actually built you know, he goes, that's something you couldn't do with an aerial shot. And then he goes on, so it's pretty exciting to have the tool to do the photography in and around the ships. And fortunately, there was a company in Melbourne called XM2. And this is pretty much what they do. They build drones. You can almost call them a rig, because catch this, they talked to them about the idea of using an Alexa M on a drone, and all the ships were fairly small. So basically they flew the red camera for projects up until then. The Alexa M is probably about 2 or 3 times the size. So they had to build like a rig, a flying drone rig to get this camera on, which is about 65 pounds. So we built a ship. The XM2 built a ship for the Alexa M. We trained the pilots and the operators, and then that's how they were using a lot of drones to fly in and do all that stuff. And that's pretty amazing. Remember when we talked to remember we had Bill Smitrovich on? Mm-hmm. I'm going back because it was a movie called Nowhere Man. No, it was with Pierce Brosnan.
November Man.
November Man. Sorry, November Man. And that was one of the first times, like, drone technology was just starting to be used in film. Remember? And we talked about that with him. And now look at what technology is doing with drones and being able to cart, like, digital cameras around, and they could start off from a quarter of a mile out.
Absolutely.
And get these sweeping shots. I think that's great. I think it's you know, I think it makes filmmaking more. I think it makes it exciting. And now that you know about it, you know that they're not doing that digitally, because there were times before they had to do that entire shot. They'd have to build digitally, and now they can use that camera. I think that's fantastic. I love that.
I do too. One of the other things that excited me, just in general, was that all the actors learned how to work with cannons and swords in pirate school. Which the late famed swordsman Bob Anderson, he was also the the lightsaber master who fought battles as Darth Vader in the Star Wars films. Mm-hmm. So, you know, they all went there and were taught. So, you know, I like that.
Yeah,
in terms of the
downside is that they had to do it at Chuck E. Cheese, but no, but you're right. No,
yeah, I mean, it just, to that point, right, the level of detail keeps that authenticity, right. So it's not just, okay, we're make-believe, we were taught.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely.
And that's another thing about these movies, particularly Curse of the Black Pearl. There is an amazing sword fight scene between Captain Jack Sparrow and Will Turner. Okay. The ante gets upped in Dead Man's Chest when there's a 3-way sword fight going on. And then some of our characters end up on a big paddle wheel that's rolling down an island, and they're sword fighting. Great sequence. There are other scenes too with Keira Knightley brandishing a sword. I always love that. You know, that's part of any pirate movie from the Errol Flynn days of the fencing. And I always get a sense that, okay, from a far shot, perhaps they're using a stunt double, probably. But when we're up close, they look like they know what they're doing. Yeah. And, you know, when you add in the sound effects of the clanking of the sword, you know, there's been no shortage of some great fencing taking place, some amazing sword play taking place in these movies. And I urge you, Phil, you got watch the first, yeah, because I mean you'll go some of the set pieces. I just go, that's awesome. It's amazing. It really, really is. They do a fantastic job.
Absolutely. Since we've kind of touched upon the various things, because I want to spend some time talking about the box office and all that. Let's first talk about music.
Sure.
Simply because obviously a big thing. Hans Zimmer very heavily involved in the first movies, not involved in this movie. However, one of his protege, Jeff Zellini, he steps in and
it's Jeff Zanelli, I think. Zanelli. Jeff Zanelli. I knew a Zanelli once. I don't know if they're related. John Zanelli. I don't know.
So he takes the mantle, and you know, you as someone who's, I mean, you know, again, for me as someone who's not seen the other movies, the soundtrack is iconic. You can't get away from that score. You can pick it up from a mile away and recognize it. Oh, that's the pirate movie, even if you've never seen.
Sure.
It, for like if you're someone like me, and so obviously a big choose to live up to. It's good that he's a protege of Hans Zimmer, but I wanted to hear from your perspective, someone who loves score 1,000 times over.
Yeah.
How does this stand?
I own all the pirate scores, and what I was most amazed about this, when you can't get Hans Zimmer, and whether that was budgetary or whether that was a conscious decision, you go to Jeff Zanelli. I mean, number one, I think what I think that he does great in this score is that he doesn't make the score bombastic. You know, I think that Hans Zimmer has become a little bit too big. And I think that some of his later scores in movies, whether it's like Batman versus Superman or whatnot, they're almost too loud. You know, when he was working with Christopher Nolan, setting up the Batman themes, even the early Pirates movies, you're right. He makes a very iconic score, and it really does match and pushes the pacing of a movie. It makes what you believe a pirate movie to be. It helps making it exciting. And Jeff doesn't overplay the part. He does a really good job. I mean, if you were to close your eyes and not know this Jeff Zanelli guy, you could think, I mean, obviously he's a protege. He's worked on all of the pirate movies, okay, that Hans Zimmer scored. You know, he does. I thought he did it. I was listening to the score on the way up. He does a great job. Does a really great job. You say that it's an iconic score. The score has become so iconic as well that they've incorporated into the ride now.
Well, okay? I would imagine, yes.
So it's in the ride. So when you hear those beats, dun 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 dun, that's Jack Sparrow's theme. It's great, and I think that he did a really, really good job. And you know, it's his first time doing this on his own in a Pirates movie. He's had familiarity with it, and he started writing, believe it or not, a year before they shot. You know, because he talks about this interview from Coming Soon. He talks about, you know, intelligent way that you kind of plot the music based around the narrative arc of the characters. Did the approach apply here? And he's like, oh yeah. He goes, in fact, that was one of the luxuries on this, because they had that script and were working on it. And he was able to have a script, and he had plenty of time. He knew the script. He knew how things were going to evolve. So he was able to like come up with themes for Karina Smith. So I think he really nails it too. You know, I mean, I think he does Hans Zimmer a fantastic service, and Hans Zimmer was a really good tutor or mentor in a sense, and he doesn't become Hans Zimmer. You know, because again, the score could have been overly bombastic, but it wasn't. I felt it. I felt it helped move this movie along, and I've enjoyed listening to the soundtrack as well on its own without the visual. It's like, okay, I like it. Liked it a lot.
Yeah, I enjoyed it as well. I thought it kept things going. Just even as we talked about that opening bank heist scene, I thought that was a lot of fun, and obviously you have the moments when it goes silent because we cut to her, and then we're back to the action, and then we're back to Henry and so forth. So nice combination of all those elements.
Yeah, and music has been I think music has played a very important part throughout the entire series. They're just sound cues that if you've watched the movies that just come on and you're like, okay. And then when it comes to the sword fighting as well, it harkens back to that old day of swashbuckling adventure, and that's what the score captures the most.
Well, you know, even to that point, the first time we're about to go to sea, but you know, I can't do it, but just imagine like this great swell of music. Everything's very exciting. We got great shots. We got smiling faces, and then boom, the ship stops. Everything stops. Yeah. So it uses all those elements quite well.
Very well.
For not only to raise all emotions, in this case comedic.
Yeah, absolutely. So. Couldn't agree with you more.
All right, so a lot of promotion went into this, which, you know, we can certainly talk about. When you basically over $100 million supposedly into the promotion of this movie. I mean, we're talking so many different trailers, so many different versions. So instead of necessarily talking about all those, by the way, my favorite is the Lego version of the sharks and the ship. I think Legos have become so fun, and I just feel so upset that I'm missing out on what is an exciting time as a kid.
You know, and Lego has made such a great, amazing pact with Disney because they own all the popular franchises, right? So they got Pirates of the Caribbean, they got Marvel, they got the Star Wars, and Lego has just made such. Whether it being a video game or whether kids can build a Star Destroyer or the Black Pearl or, you know, their favorite superhero, Lego has done just a fantastic job where not only kids, but you can be a kid at heart, Phil. I mean, come on.
I need some time before I can be a kid.
You can be a kid at heart. Like, you can enjoy Legos. Hey, we've seen the Lego movies. Do they play just straight for kids?
No.
Absolutely not. And I think that's where their strengths lie.
Absolutely.
You know? So it's fun stuff.
But anyway, yeah. As I said, in our rundown, you can get the whole list of when the trailers came out for the Super Bowl and everything and the details of that. But I
want to talk about a trailer if we can.
Sure.
Because I found it very, very interesting. And again, yes, we all know Johnny Depp is going through and continues. There was a lot of personal issues happening. I'm not going to drudge him up. I don't know the man, but there's lots going on in his life. And to your point too, when you said earlier in the show about maybe after Lone Ranger, you know, is this a Johnny Depp thing? Is there fatigue? And let's be honest, some of his past films haven't really been, you know, they haven't been doing what we're used to, you know, doing. You know, he was fantastic, however. I mean, I thought he was sort of kind of robbed from Black Mass. I thought he was great. I thought that was going to really be his comeback, in fact. But I found it interesting in Dead Man's Chest that the very first trailer, there was no Johnny Depp. There was no Captain Jack Sparrow in the trailer at all. Mm-hmm. He doesn't show up until, I'm not even sure if he was in the second trailer or the third trailer, but they did not use Captain Jack Sparrow as a marketing tool in that first teaser trailer, like at all. He was mentioned because it's the scene where Salazar comes into Henry's room, and you know, it's the jail cell. And we know he's looking for Jack Sparrow, but he's not. they didn't use him at all. They didn't use him as much, particularly at the beginning. And I wonder if that was a conscious decision to not overutilize him because of everything going on.
Maybe. I forget the trailer, so I do apologize. Maybe because it's Disney, maybe it's the Star Wars thing of let's leave intrigue. Like, where's, when Force Awakens came out, it's, where's Luke? So in that sense, again, I could be completely wrong, and you can tell me in 1 second, but maybe it's like, where's Jack? Type of thing.
Yeah.
Because it obviously worked for Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know. I just remember the first time seeing the trailer, I thought it was very interesting that there was no Jack Sparrow, because up until then, they were hanging their pirate hat on Jack Sparrow to sell these movies and to bring in audience. Like I said, that character has had such an amazing evolution, because, again, when you watch this, particularly the first movie, he's just the guy, he's the fly in the ointment. He's not, the movie's really not about him, but his presence is felt through every character of the movie. And he was so good and so entertaining to watch that he became obviously the most popular character. And obviously you needed him in the second and third movie. But Stranger Tides is interesting because that's the first movie that, we don't have Gore Verbinski in the helm, Rob Marshall, no Keira Knightley, no Orlando Bloom in the movie. And this movie definitely had to stand on the shoulders of Johnny Depp. It had to. So it's interesting. We're going to make a sequel now. We're going to make Dead Men Tell No Tales. And they didn't use him at the beginning. So I don't know what they were thinking, but maybe they said, you know what, let's just say it's going to be about him, but we're not going to show Johnny Depp, and we'll see if the audiences like it or not.
Well, to that point,
very interesting.
So, as of May 31st, I have that it grossed $89.6 million in the U.S. and Canada.
Yeah, actually, we can bring it up as of June 1st. Thus far, 93, as I just hit a refresh on that.
What do we got worldwide then?
Well, worldwide, now this is interesting. And this is factoring into sequels and whatnot, okay? Worldwide, our foreign take thus far is $297 million.
Is that still from today, or is that from...
That was from today. And we're looking at $390 million worldwide, okay? Its foreign gross thus far is 76.2% of the gross, the worldwide gross, okay? Its opening weekend domestically was $62.9 million, okay? Almost 63, and that's... and I think it was 75 for the 4-day, right? But here's the interesting thing. I believe, because of this movie, I was thinking about this. Is the United States no longer the superpower of movies? Like, everybody looks at the States for how a movie grosses, okay? But now, as our world is getting more global with technologies, they're able to capture grosses worldwide. And before, grosses were used worldwide to sort of kind of puff up a gross. And now when I'm looking at grosses like this, right? Movies are becoming, they've always been a big export for us. And now that we've opened doors to China, right, for movies, now it's become even bigger. So when a movie like Pirates of Dead Men Tell No Tales can be $297 million and it accounts for 76% of the entire worldwide gross, it just makes me wonder, internationally, do they treat movies better than we do? Because they're actually paying and going to the movies. And granted, there are more territories than the 50 states. I understand that, okay? But places like China, Japan, Asia, Mexico is really big. Yeah. It's becoming an export. And is it becoming a bigger player because, like, they always say domestically here, because I read up on the stories, box office is down, okay? and we're fractured because of technology and in which ways people can watch their media, whether it be on an iPad, whether it be on an iPhone. They say that has a lot to do with it. Netflix is constantly trying to hammer away at our video windows. But overseas, not so much the case. It's very interesting. There was a big thing about Cannes and the film festival, and Netflix was going over there. And they were being braggadocio about breaking down windows. And China has already said, you know what, screw you. We're going to boycott your Netflix movie over here. We just got China to like freaking adhere and crack down on piracy big time. That's how we've opened up our doors. So it just makes me wonder if it does $297 million, if a sequel is to be had of Dead Men Tell No Tales, it's not going to be because of domestic. It's because they're going to make it for the foreign territories. And a story I've told here before is from Fox, 20th Century Fox. They were making a second Percy Jackson movie. And I remember talking to a guy that I knew going, the first one didn't, what the hell? Like, why? He goes, oh, we're not doing it for here. We're doing it for overseas. So Johnny Depp obviously has cachet. Pirates of the Caribbean as a franchise has cachet. Maybe not so much over here, but definitely overseas. And it's very scary to me because I always looked at America like movies are a part of Americana. And, if they're going to start to make movies for overseas more than here, that's sort of a weird shift.
Well, I mean, I think, some can attribute to it's a sign of just where we're at politically. It in some sense could be a good wake up call, both politically and movie wise and everything like that. To that point,
I hope I didn't bore anybody with this thesis. I mean, but I just think particularly when you look at this movie, right, which has been a franchise, it's been a popular franchise, and it's this. It's slowing down here considerably. It hasn't even broached 100 million yet.
We'll talk about it too. I mean, there's a lot of factors that people are talking about in terms of Baywatch, which also came out with this, which we'll talk about next. So check that out if you saw that movie. But it kind of leads into Rotten Tomatoes and critics and things like that. And a lot of people are saying there's just a huge disconnect in how critics are ruining movies basically in America. Because, I mean, you look at this score, it's got a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes. Right. It's fluctuating between 31 and 30, let's just say 30 as of now. Not a great score. I don't think it's deserving of what it ultimately is. And, there's been, because of Baywatch more in particular than Pirates, but I can attribute it to Pirates. Yeah, it's suffering here because of it, perhaps.
I was going to save it for Baywatch. I can do it here. We can talk a little bit of Baywatch. But here's my whole thing. As a film reviewer, as a film critic, as a person who loves to talk about movies, listen, Phil, I'm Mr. Ego. I mean, I'm amazed how you fit into this room with my ego, right? I mean, I would love to say that my opinion would sway our kind viewers who give their time to watch us as to whether or not they see a movie, but it doesn't. To blame Rotten Tomatoes, that complaint is a wham, I'm a cry. No, because here's the reason why. There are plenty of movies out there, okay, that if you want to see a movie, there are movies that are critic proof, okay. If you want to see a movie, if you love Pirates of the Caribbean, you're gonna go see that movie, okay. Where Rotten Tomatoes comes in, and here's another perfect example, Suicide Squad. That was one of the worst reviewed movies of last year. Didn't stop it from making hundreds of millions of dollars, well more than Dead Men Tell No Tales, okay? Same thing with Batman vs. Superman, didn't get the best reviews going. And the thing of it is, it's what people really want to see. Now, if you're a casual fan of Pirates of the Caribbean, right, and you see a 30%, that may sway you from going. If you had a choice of movies, you might not go see Pirates because of that 30%. But if you're in, you're in. Now, on the converse side, how many movies have we talked about that have gotten 80%, 90%?
And
right?
people, yeah.
And people don't go. Like, you can use in a sense, we talked Alien Covenant, which did okay at the box office, but we've talked about a lot of other movies that did really well from a critic standpoint. It didn't really help push the needle there, right? So to blame it on Rotten Tomatoes is you're pointing a finger at something that's you're really not entirely true. My thing is, make a damn good movie. Just make a good movie. And you know what? People are going to come out and then they'll like it. You'll get good reviews. And that's what spurs our business. In fact, I would say that it's Rotten Tomatoes that helps that middle movie. When it comes Academy Award season, when it comes to that smaller film, any like Ex Machina, I think is a good example, right? People go see it. They really like it. They'll talk to their friends about how good of a movie it is. And then those people might go on Rotten Tomatoes and see that it's in the 90 percentile. They're going to go see that movie. Yeah. So it perpetuates. I mean, it's a whole thing. But if you're sort of kind of on the fence, Rotten Tomatoes may sway to dissuade you. A critic, whatever that critic may say, could sway you. But if you really want to see the movie, the only thing that it's going to do, Rotten Tomatoes, is, for me, all right, I'm a really very big Pirates of the Caribbean fan, right? So when I go on to Rotten Tomatoes and I see it 30%, I get disappointed. I'm like, oh, bummer. Well, but I'm going to go see it.
Yeah.
And make up my own mind so I can talk about it here. And many times this has happened to us too. How many times have we seen really shitty reviews on Rotten Tomatoes? We come back and go, what the hell were they thinking?
No.
That happens too, right?
So, I mean, I guess in essence, yeah, you're as confused as perhaps I am at this point. It's a couple of things, I guess you can attribute franchise fatigue. That certainly can play into it. You could attribute, obviously, the changing landscape. So there's a variety of factors in that sense. But yeah, and what shocks me kind of most, I guess, is, especially here with kind of everything, everything is so political. I can't go anywhere without someone talking about what's going on politically.
Right.
And so you would think someone a movie like this, or comedies in general, that there would be a sense of escapism. And ironically, there's not. And so I'm even further confused by that. Therefore, yeah, I don't have an answer for you.
I don't, and neither do I, Phil. And that's why I'm saying, are we is Hollywood making movies for the United States of America? Because is it having the same effect? Does movie going have the same effect that it used to, say, 10 years ago? I mean, it certainly isn't like it was in the 80s, like the late 70s or mid 70s into the 80s. People were clamoring for solid entertainment. I mean, those years solidified Robert Zemeckis and George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and the like, and made, Eddie Murphy stars and Sylvester Stallone. Things have changed so much that, again, I just wonder, when I look at such a gross, and it's 76% of the gross is overseas, do they take movie going more seriously? Do they look at this entertainment far more seriously than we do? Because we become so fractured and we'd rather watch or play a video game. Movies haven't become, and this is sad to me, it bothers me, and it scares me, where movies aren't, unless it's a superhero movie, and this is why originality is fading away. Movies aren't becoming, they're maybe not as important as they used to play a role in society, because to your point, you're right, people would go for the escapism. I got to get out. I'm so inundated with what's going on politically in the world. You would go to the movie to have a good time. And for whatever reason, franchise fatigue, the cost of movies continually rises, but I say it's matched by the technology that's out in the movie theaters. Yes, $13 for a matinee and an XD screen can be considered very expensive, but if you try to go to a baseball game, you ain't getting in for $13 unless you got not so good of a team And, then when you factor in those concessions as well, it's still a relatively...
Baseball's a whole other thing, because I'm just...
Baseball or a football game? You can't go to a football game for $13. You just can't do it. So it's still a relatively modicum, affordable thing to do for entertainment. But what's happening? Like, we should be supporting movies, and granted, 50 states does not compare it to the rest of the world, because it's the rest of the world. I understand that. But they obviously, there's a drive, there's a passion to go to the movies there that seems to, the luster, it needs to be waxed.
Yeah. Well, in that sense, the good news is that the directors have both stated that they would be interested in doing a sequel, and as evidenced by the post-credit scene, we may very well get one of those. So, if you really want another Pirates movie, which, you know what, I could go see, I would enjoy another one.
Please
personally.
Watch the first 4, please.
I'll definitely watch at least the first one.
Okay.
I'll definitely watch the first one, which I guess leads us to our final thing. Demetri's ranking.
Yeah.
I can't rank the movies because mine would just be a toss of the coin.
Yeah, I mean, again, watching all these movies again, it brought me back. And so my ranking of these movies, obviously, Curse of the Black Pearl, which was the first one. That's the one that started it all. That's my, the favorite. It's a movie based off of a Disney theme park attraction. And again, the country or the movie-going audience goes into this going, how good can it be? And it turns out that it was very good. This was solid quality entertainment. We've seen Johnny Depp like we had never seen him before. It made stars out of Keira Knightley. And I mean, Orlando Bloom was popular, because he was Lord of the Rings, but now he's in a second franchise and the girls just loved him. It's a very good movie. My second one is Dead Man's Chest, the second movie in the franchise. To me, I call it's the Empire Strikes Back of the series. I mean, you've got excellent set pieces. You have a great villain in delivering us Davy Jones. You've got character growth, and you got a hell of a twist ending. Whereas at the very end, Barbossa shows up, who is oft. In Curse of the Black Pearl, and again, it ends on this down note. Captain Jack Sparrow is taken to Davy Jones's locker. He's eaten by a kraken, but it's a really solid movie. And my third, I'm actually going to Stranger Tides. This is proceeding. This is the fourth movie. Rob Marshall takes the reins from Gore Verbinski. There was a fun chemistry for me between Johnny Depp and Penelope Cruz. And of course, we have Barbossa in this again. And it's a race for the Fountain of Youth. And it has awesome looking mermaids. You got Blackbeard. And there's a great Captain Jack Sparrow escape thing in London. That's just, if you like the bank robbery in this movie, the opening to Stranger Tides, I think, was done much better. It was fantastic. And then I think fourth for me is actually Dead Man's Chest.
If you're looking at the rundown, there's a typo because it says Dead Man's Chest again, which is supposed to Dead Men
Tell No Tales. My bad. Sorry. Now, again, continuity issues aside, you have a good new female lead character. Javier Bardem, we talked about, is a lot of fun. Barbossa's backstory, Jack's backstory, it's all in there. But for me, as a fan of the show, Will and Elizabeth returned and reunited those characters, and they really are the heart of the first three movies. And then my last one, the fifth for me, is At World's End. I mean, this is a movie. It has a 3-hour runtime. It's close to 3 hours. The movie is very bloated and very overly convoluted. It's hard to keep up who's double-crossing who's selling out who, where the compass is, where this is. Great special effects. There are some good sword fighting set pieces. There's a scene that takes place in a maelstrom that I remember seeing this in 3D in a theater that looked amazing. And it does tie up the thread line of Elizabeth and of Will Turner. But ultimately, I think the movie just sinks under its own weight. So there's my ranking. I'd love to hear your ranking, what you think of the Pirates movies. You agree, disagree? Let me know.
So there you have it. That wraps it up for us. Again, because the franchise is so large, we can talk about various other things. But that's why we have the comments.
Sure.
That's why we have you guys to initiate that conversation and to talk with you guys there. Converse, if you will. So we always enjoy that. Keep doing it. The conversations are nothing short of lively.
Absolutely, and it's what draws me to this show from day one. I mean, we're not talking politics. This isn't CNN. We're talking about movies. And
the Pirates have a code, so this gets political at times. So thank you guys for joining us. At DMovies1701 is where you can.
Hey, and in a serious note, I think I just passed 200 supporters on
Look
on
at
Twitter.
that.
Look at that.
We went from 5 last week to 200.
I know. Well, 195 of them were bots. Yeah, whatever. So, but thank you, folks, and thanks for writing in too.
So thank you guys as always. You could follow Marissa at Serafini TV. It's a shame that she didn't get to join us for this one, but she will be back next week certainly. And follow me at philsvitek.com. You can get all the stuff there. Keep checking out other episodes. This is our first Pirates movie we've done as Anatomy of a Movie.
Which is crazy.
So apologies that we don't have the other ones, but hopefully we gave you guys enough of a discussion. But plenty of other movies. I mean, we're going close to 400 movies overall. So
We need a press release out because that's a hell of a lot of movies.
see, hear that, fans? You got to write a press release. Get going.
Get off the air, please.
We've got tons of great movies coming up. Wonder Woman next week. We'll have a full house one way or the other for that movie. That I can promise you. A lot of good buzz on that one. We're doing Baywatch today. And tons of other movies coming up. Dunkirk, Spider-Man Homecoming.
God. Cars 3.
Yeah, so much to talk about. But enough talking on this episode. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye, all.
Bye.
See ya.
Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff. We would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.